Good morning again. It's a Sunday apparently, I think. I know so many of you are like myself are losing not only, you know, tracking days of the week correctly, but also time has taken on a strange new meaning. And also dreams. I've been having tremendous dreams lately. Not negative dreams, actually quite positive dreams. But this video, let me start. It's going to be analogy filled because within magical language, within this kind of world, and I think I communicate quite well within analogies and metaphors. You know, anyone who's a tailor or a seamstress or a dressmaker or works in textiles, you know that, well, we all kind of know anyway. If you have a piece of fabric and you're making something, whether it's a shirt or whether it's something even knitting on wood, at the end of the stitching process or the weaving process, in order to close off the fabric at the end, you have to create a hem or a seam or a bead. And this stops the fabric or the wool at the end of the jumper, sweater, shirt, sheet, whatever, from becoming frayed. And that the fabric immediately will become destroyed by movement because all the strands get pulled out. And that's why they make a seam at the end of a line of fabric when they're making clothes. It's not just an aesthetic thing. It serves a function. It prevents the fabric from fraying. Now, this relates to two things: normie lifestyle processes and magic. And if you don't believe that magic is part of life, this video will help you understand why magic is so important to me in my work and my life outlook, and why it should be for you too. One of the things and one of the reasons why this economy has been imploded on purpose, there's a few factors, but the reason the timing is done now, using this virus that is a real virus, is killing people, is not, is a slightly worse than normal seasonal flu. But why they chose this time, there's a couple of reasons, but I keep seeing the name Hillary Clinton in the background. Remember, she expected to be queen of the world back in 2016. Her whole life trajectory was to become the first woman president of the USA, and therefore the first woman leader of the planet. And as most sane people knew, she was a mass murdering psychopath. She made that infamous video that she never will live down, of her boasting about, we came, we saw, he died, when she heard that Muammar Gaddafi had been anally raped to death with a bayonet without trial. And that was probably a thing that when even people that supported the Democrats went, I'm not voting for her. And that was her undoing, because psychopaths always do things like that. They'll show how murderous they really are. And it comes out very quickly in the female ones more than the male ones. And she showed the world her true colours then, although a lot of people knew before that what kind of monster she was. Now, she's been, if you saw the photo, the picture, what her face looked like when she lost that election, she looked like the devil had lost hell. Mephistopheles had lost the underworld. And she basically died and had to begin again. But because she couldn't retire, because she's so vindictive and so vicious and so hateful, she had to get Trump somehow. She didn't have the military behind her, so she could lead a coup, but she had someone else that could lead a coup for her. And that was the mainstream media, who worship her like a god and all hate Trump. And also the neocons, the Bush crowd, the ones who kill millions of people for oil and stealing gold and property. This is her fellow travelers, and they all hated Trump and what Trump stood for, because Trump is not a Republican. You have to remember that, he's not a Republican. And so they waited for the right, as Rockefeller said back in '74, the right crisis. And Corona-19 gave it to them. Now, it had to happen anyway. So even if she wasn't involved, the corporate, the globalists had created a financial system that was doomed anyway and had been living on the knife edge for years. Now, there was all kinds of elements involved in this, but always comes back to the population. The politicians, the globalists, the likes of Bill Gates and all, are terrified of human beings, terrified of them. And they're terrified, like Zbigniew Brzezinski said, of a mass awakening of the population. They were terrified of this. Now, one of the things that was going very bad for them, on top of all the other stuff, the dot-com bubble had failed, and that was the beginning of what became a pension crisis. People in the West had paid in enormous amounts of money into pensions, whether they were defined contribution schemes or defined benefit schemes. But these pensions, there is not enough money on earth to pay for the pensions that are out there. There simply isn't enough money. And when you were working in a job and you paid into your pension scheme, they would take that money and they would invest it in things like the dot-com bubble, which was a complete flop. Vast amounts of pension money was lost in that. The Genome Project was also another one. The Genome Project was supposed to be the beginning of a new era of science, where they could actually tell everything from what your favorite color would be in your genes. What they discovered were that we were not in our genes. We're far more complex as human beings, and all beings, than our genetic code tells us. That's just a building. That's the hardware. It's not the software. And so that's why all this money that was poured into startups behind the Genome Project all was flushed down the toilet, because the Genome Project didn't produce what it was supposed to produce, a whole new genetic economy where genes would be like the Iron Age or the Steam Age or the Electronic Age or the Digital Age. It was the Gene Age. It didn't happen. It was supposed to revolutionize medicine and everything. All the pension money was lost that was put into that to invest in that was all lost. It had been invested in everything from, budget airlines to, Disney. That's where your pension was involved. It wasn't paid, but there still wasn't enough to pay it back. Now, people who are approaching pension years, late 40s, early 50s, and start to think of mid 50s, starting to think then about their retirement and what they're doing. These are people that generally have a lot of political power in society and a lot of social and economic power. It was imperative that they did not find out that there was no pensions for them. The pension bomb had to be offset somehow. Initially, they tried talking about raising the retirement age to 70, and that would give them 5 years to try and solve the problem in the future. But now that wasn't even going to work. So now, as they've crashed the economy, I'm not gloating here or laughing at you or anything, but I'm telling you right now that those of you who paid vast amounts of money into your pension schemes, whether it's a defined contribution or defined benefit scheme, you may as well as piss that money away down the pub. A much better pension would have been to hold on to that money and buy your property off or prep for the future. But the normies won't do that because they have absolute faith in the process of authority. There was a horrible article on amongst a cacophony of horrible articles relating to COVID-19 in the RTE, the Irish National Broadcast Propaganda Service today. Yeah, and it was How You Must Unconditionally Trust Authority, written by a Marxist professor. The Marx of philosophy. These are the experts they're wheeling in front of us, not experts in virology and things like that. They're wheeling out bureaucrats, college professors involved in everything that has nothing to do with how to deal with a pandemic. But because they're experts of some kind, that means they're experts of all kinds. Now, a lot of the reason why people are losing their pension and why normies are normies is because they They follow the scientific process through life. Do you remember I spoke in videos recently about there's two elements to this? There's two ways that the scientific process should work or can work. One is the chain link method, which is the common method today, where each part of the process is linked by a chain, forming a long chain, a link. If one of those links fails, the entire process collapses and they have to start again. And this is the basis of the scientific method of the day. Wherein you had in the days of natural philosophy, you had something called, well, something that was now called the cable link method, where the investigation moved along under different strands of a cable. So therefore, if you're trying to discover something and one of the cable strands failed, the other four continued. It was just that one failed, not the whole process. And that's why we've made almost no amazing discoveries by process in recent times since the scientific method took over, because it's all a binary type mentality, zeros and ones. The internet that you're watching me on, these video processing, these engines, they're running on mathematical systems that were developed 2,000, 3,000 years ago in Greece. That's how advanced we are. We're dealing with things that were the Crookes tube. You're watching me on that screen that eventually led to the LED and the transmission of pictures 125 years ago or whatever. 200 years ago, it's like in recent times, what anything they've discovered has been like they've accidentally found something in archaeology in the ground, or they accidentally stumbled upon something in space that they saw. But there hasn't been the same discovery because of this chain link method. Now, that has been given to people's lives. I go to work, I pay my pension, and I collect my pension because I have absolute faith in the process that's presented in front of me. And you've heard me use that word an awful lot during these videos since this crisis started, a process. The process becomes corrupt when it fails. So, for instance, you get a job working in a shop, right? And the deal of that is you work here 40 hours a week selling chocolate biscuits. And then you get paid at the end of the week. That's the process, right? You steal money from the till, you've corrupted the process, and then you're caught and you're fired. And that's what natural law and karma and justice really is. Whether it be on the physical plane, the metaphysical plane, the spiritual plane, the ethical plane, that's what that is. The corruption of the process. That's what that is right there and then. And that's what the real meaning of the word corruption is. So the normies, I was on an Irish message board the other day, and boards.ie, if you have never been on boards.ie, it is the epitome of Irish conservatism. Now, Irish conservatism is not like American conservative. They'd be all like woke liberals, but absolute faith in the system and government and process. And there's no such thing as deviations from that. It's all flat earth conspiracy theory if you think differently, and even slightly. And the mods are all civil servants on antidepressants, and they're all waiting for their massive pension. And they'll probably get it because I'll tell you why. They're going to create an inner party and an outer party soon. And people who work in marketing or advertising or communications actually are posting on that saying, it'll be good when I get back to work at my American multinational in the Dublin Docklands. You're not going back to work with them. Your company is gone. Your job is gone. Your career is gone. The economy is gone. You and what you think you are is gone. Now, I'm not saying this to frighten people. I'm trying to say, prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. Because it's better knowing and planning for the future to survive in this new world economy than slashing your wrists one day because you ran out of Netflix, owned by the Bernays family, by the way, series to watch. This has been all planned, and all the globalist ducks have been in a line for a long time. When they pulled the kill switch, they knew exactly how they were going to pull the kill switch from the moment Rockefeller said, all we need is the right crisis. And they got it. Here we are, through the looking glass. Now, again, most of the people follow my work are not normies, or if they are normies doing a normie life, they're not wired into the system. They're aware of its vulnerabilities and dangers, and they don't trust most people because they know most people are mindless morons. So they're managing well. What they're doing is they're enjoying this lovely weather for the spring. They're sitting at home. They're enjoying the peace and quiet. They're sleeping till 1 o'clock in the afternoon and going to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they're enjoying the peace and quiet of the tranquility at the moment. The normies are distracting themselves from Netflix. That will only last for so long. In fact, when I have a theory that they'll be all sent back to work when all the Netflix series are watched. I really do believe that. Because remember, Edward Bernays' family runs Netflix, and Sigmund Freud. That's the whole family. That whole dynasty runs Netflix. And you think those TV shows and those films that they make don't come with an agenda? Remember, it was Netflix who made the Maddie McCann documentary exonerating anyone who was involved or suspicions based on a mysterious, non-existent kidnapper. The reality is that the number one suspect in the murder of Maddie McCann, kidnapping, sex, rape, and murder of Maddie McCann, was no one other than what's his name? Freud, not Stigma. I can't remember his name, but Clement Freud, a notorious paedophile. His nephew runs Netflix, and that's why they made that documentary, keeping his name out of it. This is the world you live in, normies. Ooh, you've been told for decades to wake up. It's not easy, is it? It's not easy realizing that your unconditional faith in the process of authority has become corrupted. They're not going to get their pensions. They're not going to get them. They would have been better off investing that money in prepping for the future, buying their home outright, or they would have even been better off down the pub pissing it down the sink. And all these big pensions companies like Marsh and McLennan, Price Waterhouse Cooper, I don't know what it's called now, and all the other ones, and I don't know who's involved in now. I don't even know if Ernst & Young still exists. But all these people who are doing this, they're all going to Scarper now. All these companies will vanish because they will be like the aristocrats during the French Revolution. Whereas my 100,000 lump sum and my €1,000 a week pension I was promised, it was never there. It hasn't been there since the failure of the dot-com bubble. And that's all gone. Now, that's the process. Now, this is a remarkably complex thing, and they've just encapsulated it under a branding of COVID-19. But it's bigger than this. Fundamentally, and I know you kind of get that feeling, and many of you know this feeling watching my videos, that this is a spiritual thing. This goes to the heart and spiritual identity of each and every one of us as individuals, but also as a collective. This is a spiritual crisis. You will now find, if right now, what kind of person if you're dead inside, you'll be believing everything the government is telling you in a state of fear, thinking that people like me are morons, and making personal attacks on me, or you will, and ignoring all the things I'm saying in this video, or you will go into yourself and think deeply about things. Who am I? What's my destiny? Where am I going? And this is the people you need to be around. I'm not saying me, I mean people like you around. I'm nobody, but people like you around. You have to be around people like this. These are the people you need to be around to get to become the psychic dissidents. Do you remember from years ago when I wrote Puzzling People, I talked about the concept of the consciousness insurgent, and I spoke that Lucifer was the original embodiment of the consciousness insurgent, how he questioned the authority of the demon Jehovah, the brutal, vicious, God of the Old Testament. And I said that is the way Eve was leading us, not out of paradise, but into paradise. And using that metaphor, and I'm still here, conscious parasite. Conscious parasite, but conscious insurgent and psychic dissident, where we are now, is the same thing. When this thing recovers and life goes back to normal, which will mean enormous amounts of middle class people on unemployment or on fixed contracts that they get paid when they feel. This is going to be a dream for these corporations. Now, they'll all spin it when it's all over. They'll throw parties all over the world. And this is why they'll be celebrating government workers, fire, and they've already started policemen, doctors, bin men even, for fuck's sake. This is why they're celebrating them. They're all agents of the state. They have to make you believe, and it's happening right now, that the government and the state are God. And they're the ones who are going to save you from all the corporations. And that's why the neo-Marxists and the cultural Marxists are loving this. And the hardcore socialists. Notice how all the upper middle class suddenly aren't worried about the impending dangers of climate change? It was never real. Phantoms, mirages, and chimeras. And these phantoms and mirages and chimeras won't go away. They'll be transformed into something like we're all in this together. But we won't be all in this together, because remember I said some people will collect their pensions? That's who will get them, government workers. They now have the chance to create the Orwellian inner party, the Winston Smiths they've always wanted. And people in government jobs, civil servants, and these are always people, generally people of no ambition in life, other than to rot away in an office until they make their mammies proud because they're getting a big pension when they retire. They will become the Ministry of Truth, they will be all the Winston Smith types, or like Smythe, the guy who was like boasting about the Newspeak dictionary. You haven't seen it before anyone else. That's what they'll be like. And they will get sizable pensions to keep them in what they call gravy. Their unions call gravy, to keep them in the system, but also to give them a sense of being more better and aloof, a class system above the rest of us who will be the prollies, the real life prollies. But as Winston Smith found out, the prollies are actually happier. So if you're not a normie and you're outside that system, those government workers, you actually have the chance for a happy, fulfilling life. Always remember that these videos are not negative; they're positive. I'm giving you the survival tools that I've used in my life and have worked quite well for me, and I'm sure they'll work for other ones, because they're just basically feck them if they can't take a joke, and just see what if there's a process and they're all telling you, if the authority is telling you must do this, question it. 99 times out of 10. They're lying to you. And once they won't be, and that's why you're going to go. When this COVID-19 thing ends, there'll all be a big party, fireworks around the world. They'll have a survival day for the year. The fireworks will start in Sydney and Wellington and New Zealand, and they'll travel around. All the TV presenters and all, London will light up in fireworks, and the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building. And it'll be a big fucking COVID bullshit. Have concerts by fucking U2 and all this bullshit. And that's what will happen. That's going to happen. There's going to be a big, and that will be the party to signify the inauguration of the new world that we'll be living in, which won't be as bad as what say like hardcore conspiracy theorists would tell you. There'll still be, just like, remember, it'll be prollies and inner party, and being a prolly gives you no protection by the government, but gives you an awful lot of freedom. It gives you an awful lot of freedom. Because that the inner party members don't have, because you're not afraid of fucking up so they don't take away your job and your pension. So there will be a vast loss of life. All these people who are, and I read on that Irish normie message board, who think they're all going to go back to their jobs and shopping at Forbidden Planet and buying the latest video games from GameSpot, and these adult children who keeping their lifestyle the way it was. Within 6 months, a lot of them will be dead, or in psychiatric institutions. You're going to see massive psychiatric institutions set up, and that's because they cannot. They're meat golems. They cannot break from the system. They trust the system to do everything for them. These are the same people who, when they were being marched off the trains in 1944 in Poland, who were saying to the SS officers, wait until Mr. Hitler finds out what you're doing to us Jewish people. That's the same ones. The same mentality. Absolute devotion to the state right to the very end. Now, let's bring this to a sort of a spiritual way of doing things, and this also will tie into another reason why it happened. Do you remember when that Trump... Okay, if you read my book, Sorcery, the Invocation of Strangeness, which is more than just a book about magic and sorcery, it's a book about allowing your consciousness to survive better in this world. You will remember there's a part in the book when I talked about cursing. And there's something about a curse or a hex or a spell is another process. It has to be opened and it has to be perfectly closed. Otherwise, you get the wrong kind of chaos in the middle, right? So therefore, you could have this guy who says, I want $1 million so I can have like I want $1 million," and they do a spell to get $1 million, and then they have a car crash, and they get $1 million insurance payout, whether they're in a wheelchair or they're on life support. That's what, because he didn't close the process, right? The uh, the woman who's divorced from her husband, and she's on these narcissistic recovery boards with all the other dregs of humanity, and she's saying things like, "I'm going to get my ex-husband back by hexing him," and she hexed the ex-husband and saying the curses make him suffer, and the child that they had together gets leukemia. See the ironic punishment. It's almost like an ironic punishment in element to it. If that's why you have to be, when you're passing that stream of energy from this end of the process to that end of the process, you have to make sure that this fist is grabbing it as tight as possible, is not going like this. Okay? Do you remember 4 years ago when I warned people about the Trump binding spell? How it would backfire on the people who hex Trump? They destroyed Trump's economy. But guess what? They destroyed themselves as well. The job for the weekend Wiccan who threw the tarot card and tried and bound Trump won't be there at Starbucks when they come back, when this is all over. They worked. The spell worked. But because it wasn't a clean process, and they were the unclean profane, they threw it into chaos in the middle. It became corrupted. They didn't specifically state what they wanted, and they didn't have a personal grievance against Trump. So the spell backfired with this COVID-19 and the economy collapsing. The Trump binding spell worked, and the ironic punishment is that the ones who took part in it destroyed themselves. It's like being on a ship that's sailing at sea and you don't like that ship, and you hex the ship and it sinks and you go down with it. And that's what happened with that. And that's why at the time I kept warning them, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But because of all these cosplay Stevie Nicks witchy poos who play this kind of game, who don't really know anything about the magical process. That's why anyone wants to curse me all you like. I will, you'll have my condolences when you get leukemia, cancer, or you're being carried into the psychiatric hospital in a rubber jacket. That's why I never curse anybody. It's not because I'm full of love. It's because I'm trying to fucking keep myself safe. But there's dumb motherfuckers out there, and they believe all this cursing stuff, and they got involved in the binding spell with Trump, and they sunk the ship along with themselves. And they're learning about the ironic natural law, natural justice, the tarot, and the tarot card was what really they ended up with, was the justice card. There's one more element to this that, should I say, I'm keeping an eye on, that may have also led to the timing. Yes, Hillary Clinton wanted to put the boot into Trump badly, and she waited for the right crisis. But there may be another element happening here. There are, at the end of this month, bizarrely starting on Walpurgis night, a series of asteroids and comets are going to come very close to the Earth. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I find it interesting. We're having a comet called Comet Atlas, which is going to be Sydney seems apparently it's come out of nowhere and it's already very, very bright and moving very, very fast, and amateur astronomers are getting remarkable video of it. It could be looking like, now these things often flop, the comet of the century. Now, do you remember the Shoemaker-Levy comet? That would have destroyed us if Jupiter hadn't have sucked it in. There's famous shots of Jupiter pulling the comet into its gaseous mass. That's the purpose of Jupiter and Saturn. They're vacuum cleaners of the outer solar system. They stop a lot of that shit from hitting us. All of a sudden, we have some very large asteroids that could break up under gravitational forces, and then you're going to get your EMP for real. Is that the thing? No, but I'm keeping I'm not, I would say a cautious eye on it, an interested eye on it. But I'm more positive in a different sense, that I think that that comet, I'm a firm believer, although I know nothing about astrology, I do believe strongly that what goes on in the outer cosmos and out in the stars and planets has a direct connection to human consciousness through this thing they call dark matter, this 97% of the universe that it's missing, that there is something there connecting us to them. And this is why our ancestors knew from very early days that portents and signs happened in the sky that were relative to changes on the earth amongst human consciousness and people. And this is why Rabbi Lodes knew exactly that there was going to be an attack on the Jewish ghetto in Prague, and started building the golem before the pogrom started, just by following the stars. And the same thing with many, you look at, there's something about it. There, wasn't it? I think it was Mark Twain was born and died under Halley's Comet. He was born when it was in the sky. He was born under a wandering star. And in the past, people would look for these things. They were born under a comet. They knew they would probably die under the same comet when it returned. They're the ultimate clockwork regulators of nature. Now, this Atlas comet, I haven't been able to find out when it was last here. It could have been here in the Renaissance. It could have been here at the time of the classical world. But I'm inclined, and also, has anyone noticed how bright Venus is in the sky lately? Right next to that crescent moon. Lucifer is, phosphorus, the Greek god of Venus, is blasting at the moment. The light of truth, the light of reason, the light of enlightenment. And the cosmos is putting on a show for us. It's almost like they deliberately stopped all this air traffic control, and all this air traffic has stopped so we could all see the stars in all their glory and find meaning among them. And you can sit there and say, well, astrology is bullshit because it's, no, astrology is not bullshit, because I've had my charts done for me in both Western and Eastern astrology, and it's absolutely real. How is it real? Don't know, don't care. That's the whole point. It's like magic. People say, how does magic work? Don't know, don't care. It just works. How does, what is the purpose of these ancient sites that you visit, Thomas? These ancient megaliths? Don't know, don't care. I just know they're special. I don't need to find that cable link process same thing as like when I was all my life, people say to me, why are you so cynical of the system? Don't know, don't care, I just am. Why don't you trust government? Don't know, don't care, I just don't. And it's the same thing. And I'm inclined to believe that this cosmic show that we're going to get will herald in a new world. Now, it won't change anything for normies. Normies they're basically, as a friend of mine said, most of them are just recently reincarnated herd animals like cows and sheep. And they really are. They really are like the flock. And the ones of us who have probably been around on this planet a long time in many lives, we will probably benefit. I'm convinced you're going to benefit, we're going to benefit greatly from the future. I did that reading at the Tarot workshop, and it couldn't have been more perfect victory. All the things we prepared for in our lives, it's happened. We knew this day was coming. We knew this world was coming. We knew this life was coming. But we also know that we would be ready for it when it would happen, where somebody who's pulling their fingernails out, watching the last Netflix series they have right now, is not ready. And that's how evolution works. It doesn't only work in terms of biological mutations and changes. It also works on alterations of the psyche. And I totally believe in Rupert Sheldrake's concepts, the morphic resonance, that it's already there and it waits to unfold. But the thing is that you have to unfold what you want. The normies will all be unfolding misery and horror, or being members of their inner party and outer party. The rest of us, people watching this video, and like I said, you've done a remarkable thing to get this far in life. Just look at your normie friends and the people you work with, and how they're reacting to this, and look at you. You're not in the same psychic position as they are. That's because you have already evolved your consciousness to where it should be. Ready for this. This is it. This is the New World Order. For them, is not going to be the New World Order for us. We're going to have our own New World Order. You mark my words. Some of us will do very, very well out of the future. And it won't necessarily because we have more money than the normies. It's because we have a better psychic attenuation. Take care and look after yourself.